Hello and welcome to another Royal Reviewer live pop-up chat. It is Monday the 13th of July 2020. I keep having to check what date it is because again, we're in this kind of, tell me if you're the same. Are you the same where time seems to be going very fast? You know, we are now in July. Who'd have thought that from when we were back in January? But also it seems to be going kind of slow. It's that kind of weird juxtaposition going on there. As always, this is a live chat, a live stream, so I endeavour to read and answer as many viewer comments as I can whilst I discuss a few topics that I want to talk about today. So whilst people drop in, I will talk about what I want to, the main topic I should say of today. I can see people dropping in already, so hello and welcome to everyone who is just joining in the live chat. Also a big thank you and a big shout out to all my patrons on Patreon and also channel members as well. Your support and dedication really does mean the world. So there has been a lot of speculation, talk in the press about the profile of Sophie, the Countess of Wessex. Of course, her real title is Her Royal Highness, the Countess of Wessex. There's been lots of talk for months, ever since Harry and Meghan decided to step back as senior working members of the royal family. There's been much talk about, I'm sure you've seen the headlines, about Sophie being the royal family's new secret weapon and that the Queen promotes Sophie. And it's always been the case, I've said it before and I'll say it again, that Sophie and Edward are not doing any more work than what they've always done. Harry and Meghan leaving the royal family, stepping back as being senior working members of the royal family. Of course, they are still members of the royal family, but stepping back as the working members of the royal family has not left a particular void in terms of the work that Harry and Meghan were doing. Harry and Meghan haven't passed on any of their charities, for example, to William and Catherine or to Charles and Camilla or Edward and Sophie. Harry and Meghan have largely taken, all of their projects and organisations and patronages with them. So there isn't really an increase in workload for the rest of the royal family. The only thing that I can see coming up in the future that would mean extra work is upcoming tours, because of course there are now less working royals to be able to do those tours. So it makes sense that William and Catherine, Sophie and Edward, Princess Anne, that they will be doing more of the overseas travel because, of course, the Queen, for many years now, has not been undertaking overseas long-haul travel or, overseas travel at all. So whereas Harry and Meghan would have probably done lots more Commonwealth tours, they will be picked up by the other royals. But in terms of the day-to-day work, it remains unchanged for those individual royals. They haven't taken on any more patronages or organisations as a result of Harry and Meghan stepping back. So those claims that Sophie's doing more work is simply not true. What is true, however, is that there is a little bit of a void in terms of working royals in general. We no longer have Prince Andrew as a full-time working royal. We no longer have Harry and Meghan as a full-time working royal. So, like I said, there is a void in terms of the royal reporters reporting on royals. So what has happened, of course, is that Sophie has got more attention. Edward and Sophie have got more attention. But in particular, I think people are picking up on Sophie. She is, she is still glamorous, and of course she's dedicated to her role and to her service. So is it any wonder that, in the absence of extra royals to talk about and report on, that the media have picked up on another glamorous person in the form of Sophie, the Countess of Wessex? So I'm going to read an article and we'll kind of dissect it together. So, the article headline is "Surprise! Buckingham Palace's decision shows the Queen's confidence in Sophie Wessex." Well, I think the Queen has always been very confident in Sophie and Edward's abilities to carry out their royal work. Anyway, oh, by the way, I should mention, I do love how people just call her Sophie Wessex rather than the Countess of Wessex. I kind of like, I don't know, see, I'm funny when it comes to shortening or changing people's titles. I don't always like it. I'm not a big fan of calling the Duchess of Cambridge Duchess Kate. I have done in the past because it might fit in the title better, but I'm not really a big fan of abbreviating names and titles. But I kind of find Sophie Wessex a little bit easier. It kind of trips off the tongue a little bit easier. People know who they're talking about. So in terms of monikers being a bit shorter, I kind of find Sophie Wessex more acceptable than the others, even though, you know, I have used shortened versions myself. But like I say, it's to fit in a video title, or simply just to aid people being able to search the video. But I do quite like Sophie Wessex as a name for her. Anyway, Sophie Wessex has been informally promoted this week by Buckingham Palace, and you'll find out why in a moment. Aides who believe the Queen's daughter-in-law has more than filled the void left by Meghan and Harry during the pandemic crisis. Well, as I explained earlier, this is why I explained about Harry and Meghan stepping back before I read out this article, because I think that they've kind of got this a little bit skewed. Like I say, there is no void. There isn't a void of work. Sophie and Edward are carrying out the work they've always done. The only void is, I suppose, in the attention. So for the media, they have a void. The media has a void. And now, of course, they are trying to fill that void with Sophie and Edward engagements. So let's carry on. I think I've got that straight for everybody. So Buckingham Palace, do you know what? I'm at that age now where out come the reading glasses. Yeah. Buckingham Palace, I can see now. Buckingham Palace aides are impressed by Sophie Wessex's down-to-earth personality as she moves into an increasingly significant role within the royal family. Again, I have no doubt in my mind that she is down-to-earth. But in terms of a significant royal role, she has always had a significant royal role. It's just the fact that it's getting more attention. Anyway, the Queen's daughter-in-law was informally promoted this week to fill the royal space left by Harry and Meghan's departure. Well, we've already tackled that. You know what I think about that. On Wednesday, the Countess of Wessex joined fellow members of the Bagshot Women's Institute for a catch-up at the Half Moon pub in Surrey. You may have seen the photos on Twitter, which reopened at the weekend. As you know, many places in the UK, pubs and restaurants are now open in the UK. So, let me start again, tongue twister. You see what I mean? It doesn't trip off the tongue. Sophie Wessex joined fellow members of the Bagshot Women's Institute. By the way, I know it's a women's institute, but in terms of an organisation, I wish they opened it up to men. I really do, because that is one institution that I would quite fancy joining. It sounds really fun. I mean, I'm taken by the traditional, jam and scones and tea and, baking cakes for the school fete. I think that's very me. So I kind of feel a little bit upset that I'm not allowed to join the Women's Institute, because I kind of want to. It's one organisation that I think I would actually fit in really well with. Having a good baking cakes and a natter over, scones and jam and cream. Please invite me to be a member. The first male member of the Women's Institute. Please. Anyway, she went at the weekend. So speaking on ITV's Royal Rota, Royal Editor Chris Shipp noted that, and this is obviously, proper source material, because he is an actual royal editor of ITV. So he said that this was the first time in his job that Buckingham Palace had invited royal correspondents to cover an event with Sophie Wessex on her own. So obviously, I haven't been invited to any events, so I wouldn't be able to comment on it. But going on what he says, and I have no reason to suspect that he would not be telling the truth with regards to this. So he's saying that, he hasn't been invited to cover her engagements on her own. That he has been when it's been a joint engagement, or maybe a tour or something, but not on her own. So this, he said that this marked a dramatic change in the royal spotlight as Sophie Wessex moves to fill the void left by Harry and Meghan. Well, we know what I think about the void. I think it's more about attention rather than that actually being a void. But nevertheless, it does mark a change. If the palace is inviting royal reporters to cover specifically Sophie's solo engagement, it does show that they are recognising the shift in the attention from the media. So I think that's what it is. It's the shift in the attention. They know that the media want to fill their column entries with royal stories, and they know that, you know, Sophie Wessex and Edward, of course, are ones who can be covered. Even though they're not doing any more work, it's still the same work they would have done anyway. It's being covered more. It's becoming more high profile. So no void. It's just that there is more attention to give. It kind of shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it's gone. So Chris Shipp said, and I quote, "We don't often cover the Countess of Wessex's engagements on her own. It's the only time I've covered Sophie on her own in the 3 years that he's had the job." So, you know, no reason to suspect that he is not telling the truth there. He continued, "We were invited to cover this event by Buckingham Palace." So he has said that it is an official invite by Buckingham Palace. Are we to presume then that Buckingham Palace think Sophie's profile is worth raising now? I don't think that they didn't think it was worth raising. I think that it shows a lack of royal reporters in general. And I don't know why. We all remember, I think it was when Harry went to launch, was it the Invictus Games? And he went to a European country. And it was almost like the royal reporters were saying they had to pick and choose between which royal they went to follow, and a lot of them chose to follow Harry rather than some other royals. I forget which ones it was, but there was almost like a choice. So at the time, I forget which video it is, but I remember talking about, well, you know, shouldn't there be enough royal reporters to cover all of the royal work going on? Can't they simply hire some more people so that all of the work can be covered and there's not this kind of choice between who is considered to be more high profile? But anyway, I digress. So I don't think it's the fact that the palace think that her profile is worth raising. I think it's just that they think, well, you know, hang on a minute, there is less working royals than what there used to be. Therefore, you know, we can now invite the limited amount of royal reporters to cover those engagements. He said the Countess of Wessex has done a lot of very good work with the charities and organisations she supports. Well, I completely agree with that, and they haven't got enough attention in the past. He said, with that space, there is an opportunity for the press to highlight the work she has done, which is just what I said earlier. She drove herself to the engagement in an electric car. She was very down to earth. She makes people feel very at ease, and she is very natural, says Chris Shipp. He also said she is much more down to earth than the others. She had a job before she took up the role. I mean, that is true. She did have a regular job. I mean, of course, I have never met any of the members of the royal family, so I cannot say if she's more down to earth. That is what Chris Shipp says. He says there was a real normality around her. She ran into people. She goes to the gym. She ran into the people she goes to the gym with during this pub visit. So obviously, you know, her local area, Bagshot. Of course, she lives at Bagshot Park. So it's probably a venue which she frequents, or at least the people that she comes into contact with frequent. So yes, I'm sure she would have seen, you know, some familiar faces. He said the Countess's meeting with the Women's Institute also shows her ties with the Queen, who herself has close links with the Women's Institute, which go back throughout her 68-year reign. It is true, the Queen attends one annual Women's Institute meeting for the Norfolk branch of the Women's Institute, typically during her winter Christmas break. Yeah, if you want to see photos of the event, I can also make them into a video too. If you're interested, just let me know. Have been tweeted by the Queen's official royal family Twitter account. It says here a sign that Her Majesty backed the engagement. Well, if you follow them on Twitter, you will know that the royal family always kind of post photos of what Edward and Sophie are doing. Anyway, so that is no significant change. And there we go. That is the end of that particular article. Do let me know in the comment section what you think about that. And I'll try now to read out some comments. Bev says, I admire Edward and Sophie. In fact, the Wessex family are my favourites. I like them too. And I'm also really interested in the Wessex children as well. I know Edward and Sophie, well, Sophie in particular, highlighted the fact that they are being brought up to work, to have a work ethic, to know that it's unlikely that they will have a royal role. And also she said it will be up to them, it will be a choice whether they take up what they are entitled to in terms of their HRH styles and to be prince and princess, should they want to, when they are old enough. But she has prepared them fully for a life of independent living. So I am interested to see what decision those royal children take when they get old enough. Again, let me know what you think they should be doing. Andrea says, at least they're not calling her Sophie Rhys-Jones. Yeah, her maiden name. I am another big stickler for not calling them maiden names, but I know that a lot of people still search for people by their maiden names. So sometimes I've called, Catherine, Kate Middleton, or Meghan Markle, because I know that people still hashtag that way, or when they're typing in YouTube, they search for it. So I hate it. I personally don't like shortened, incorrect titles and names, but sometimes you have to be a slave to things that you don't necessarily, like. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of abbreviated names. Bev says, I really hope that we see Lady Louise as a working royal. I hope so too. But Bev says, I have a strong sense that she has a lot to offer. Sophie described her as very clever recently. She did. And I have a hope too for that. But hey, we cannot choose for them what they want to be. If Lady Louise and James are entitled to have their own dreams, exactly the same way that, Archie is. It's a little bit different for the Cambridge children. George has a particular destiny, and I also think in a certain way that Charlotte also has a bit more of a panned out destiny. We think that she may be, eventually the next Princess of Royal once that title becomes vacant, which will obviously come available once there is no more Princess Anne, if you get what I'm saying. I think Louis may have a little more freedom for the Cambridge children. But even so, I still think, when George is king, he will need that support from his siblings. So anyway, I don't like to predict necessarily what the royal children are going to be, but it's a little bit easier to kind of work out what path is likely for the Cambridge children over that of Edward and Sophie, or indeed Harry and Meghan, because Archie still fits into the same bracket as what James Viscount, Severn and Lady Louise do. Technically, once Charles is king, he will be a HRH and will be entitled to be Prince of the realm, should he wish to, or should his parents choose to bestow that or take it up on his behalf. So there's no difference in that regard. Canetta says, Sophie is beautiful. I took personal day off work to watch her and Edward's wedding. I remember it. I remember vaguely, but yes, I remember. I mean, how beautiful she looked with that beautiful kind of cross necklace. It was lovely. Leanne says, Charlotte, Princess Royal. I think there is no one else who could be the Princess Royal next apart from Anne. But of course, Anne's 70th birthday coming up. Right, I'm going to move on now to the final story of the day. So I'm going to read a royal family tweet that was tweeted about an hour ago. So again, it's another event in the year that would have gone ahead that is now not going ahead. So another occasion to miss what we're no longer having. So this week would have been the annual Swan Upping, which is the census of the families of swans on the River Thames. So all the swans, I know it's like this famous, thing that the Queen owns all the swans in England. Well, what they do is every year they count the swans on the River Thames. So Swan Upping dates back centuries to when swans were an important source of food. Thank goodness they are not anymore. But today it's all about conservation and education, ensuring the swans' welfare. So although the swan upping ceremony will not take place this year, the Queen's swan marker and his team are still working to protect the swans and cygnets in their natural habitat. So the work is still going ahead, but the big ceremony is not taking place. And if I just show you a little quick picture, if I can, on here, I'm hoping you can see, that is kind of how they do the ceremony with like a little barge and uniforms. And it's a big, it's one of those things that it's not necessary to happen. It's pomp and it's circumstance, but it's one of those traditions that I think people would miss if it wasn't there, if you get what I mean. So yeah, I just think, again, it just reminds us of just events that are happening all over the summer that we're no longer getting to be a part of. It really makes us appreciate what we've got until it's gone, until we can't have it. So I'm hoping many of these things, the ceremony of the keys and, everything up in Scotland, Holyrood Week, I'm hoping all of these things, Chelsea, the races, I'm just hoping that everything gets back to normal for next year. We can most certainly hope. L. Hodge says, what a nice tradition. I think so too. And there was also a little bit of information about it. If you want me to read it, I'll read it. So, a flotilla of traditional Thames rowing skiffs, which is what I showed you the picture of, manned by swan-uppers, they're called swan-uppers, in scarlet rowing shirts, and headed by the Queen's swan marker, wearing a hat with a white swan's feather, row their way steadily up the Thames. All up, they cry, as a family of swans and cygnets is spotted, and the swan-uppers carefully position their boats around the swans, lift them from the water and check their health. The swan marker's iconic 5-day journey, it takes 5 days to go upriver, has been an annual ceremony for hundreds of years, and today it has 2 clear goals: conservation and education. Swans, of course, are no longer eaten, but swan upping still takes place once a year on the Thames. The swan uppers weigh and measure the cygnets and check them for any signs of injury, commonly caused by fishing, hooks and line, which must be awful if you find one that has an injury. The young cygnets are ringed with individual identification numbers that denote their ownership. If they belong to the Vinters of the Dyers Livery Companies, you try saying that fast, the cygnet's ownership is determined by their parentage. However, all crown birds are left unmarked. The Queen retains the right to claim ownership of any unmarked mute swan swimming in open waters, but this right is mainly exercised on certain stretches of the River Thames only. So there we go, a little bit of information on swan upping. Leanne says, can you imagine how huge a toasted swan would be? Oh my god. Thank goodness we enjoy them visually instead of gastronomically. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and I completely agree. I have no idea how a huge toasted swan... Do you toast them, or would you have done them on a spit? I don't know. Would you have ovened them like a chicken? I have no idea. But yeah, most definitely, I would not like to go back to those days where swans are eaten. I'm sure they are in some places, but I'm glad we don't. Canetta says, there was a pair of swans at the lake in Elizabethtown, and those two were mean. They can be quite aggressive, yes. Attacking people at the lake, nothing worse than dealing with a pair of mean swans and the 200 Canadian geese. Canadian geese can be very similar, I know. So yes, I can quite imagine. Leanne said I meant roasted. I was going to say, I would not like to toast a swan. Seriously. Right, I'm going to have the rest of my slightly cold now tea, which of course has the Queen Elizabeth design on it. There we go. So, those are my 2 stories for today. If anything else crops up, I will of course pop on and do a live chat. So, it's really important to make sure that you give a thumbs up, leave a comment, make sure you are subscribed, and also thank you so much to all of the channel members who support by being a YouTube channel member. It really helps and makes all the difference. And thank you again so much to everyone who is a patron on Patreon. And you can find the link to my Patreon. It should be in the description box below. So again, thank you so much for supporting beyond watching the videos. Right, I am going now. So all that's left for me to say is have a really good day, stay safe, and from me in Shropshire, mwah, to you all, and goodbye.